My name is Sophia Castellano. I'm 27 years old, and 14 years ago, my own parents threw me out of the house when I was just 13. Last week, they showed up at my Aunt Rosalind's will reading, the woman who raised me for the past 14 years, with confident smiles and a private attorney, absolutely certain they would walk out with millions. But when attorney Julian Ferris opened that sealed envelope and began reading, those smiles vanished. And when he reached Clause 8, my mother, the woman who once declared I was no longer her daughter, shot to her feet, her face chalk white, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. Before I tell you what happened next, if you enjoy stories about justice and family boundaries, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? Drop a comment and let me know. To understand why my mother reacted that way, I need to take you back to the summer of 211, when I was a 13-year-old girl who believed she was the root cause of every problem in her family. Growing up in a modest house in East Providence, Rhode Island, I learned early that love in our family was not distributed equally. My father, Anthony Castellano, worked as an electrician for a commercial contracting outfit downtown. He was a man of few words, and most of those words agreed with whatever my mother said. My mother, Denise, worked the front desk at a dental office and ran our household with the precision of someone who always knew exactly who deserved what. My sister Nicole was 2 years older than me. She had Mom's chestnut hair, Mom's hazel eyes, Mom's easy laugh. Everyone said so. Nicole looks just like you did at her age, Denise, and Mom would beam. I looked like our late grandfather, Dad's father. Dark hair, dark eyes, a quiet disposition. Mom never said it was a bad thing. She just never said much about me at all. The differences showed up everywhere. For Nicole's 15th birthday, Mom threw a party with 15 guests, a 3-tier cake from the bakery on Pawtucket Avenue, and a rented photo booth. For my 13th birthday, 3 months later, it was the 4 of us around the kitchen table with a marked-down cake from the grocery store, where Mom sometimes picked up shifts. The frosting said, "Happy birthday" with no name, a generic leftover from someone else's canceled order. I did not realize what was happening until I was 11. That is when I discovered Nicole had a college savings account that had been opened when she was 5 years old, 6 years of deposits, thousands of dollars. I asked Mom why I did not have one. She looked at me like the question surprised her. "Nicole needs money for college," she said. "You will figure something out. You are good at adapting." That was the first time I understood my place in this family. I was the spare child kept around but never truly wanted. The summer of 2011 changed everything. In April of that year, I applied for the Rhode Island Young Scholars Institute at Brown University. It was a 6-week residential program for students who showed exceptional promise in science and mathematics. The scholarship covered everything: tuition, room, board, materials. Total value, $3,900. I did not tell anyone I had applied. I had learned not to get my hopes up out loud in that house. On May 12th, the acceptance letter arrived. Out of over 1,800 applicants from across the state, 40 students had been selected. I was one of them. For exactly one afternoon, I felt like I mattered. Then Nicole found out about a dance intensive in Boston that her instructor had mentioned. 3 weeks, no scholarship, price tag $2,600. That night at dinner, Mom announced the solution she had worked out in her head. "Sophia, you will decline that science thing. We cannot afford to send both of you to summer programs, and Nicole's intensive will help her audition portfolio." She said it like she was discussing meal planning, not crushing someone's dreams. I stared at my plate. The words came out before I could stop them. "No." The whole table went silent. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. "Excuse me." Mom's voice dropped to that dangerous register I had heard her use on customers who tried to reschedule appointments without notice. "This scholarship is not your money to redirect," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I earned this. It is mine." Mom looked at me like I had transformed into a stranger right before her eyes. "If you cannot sacrifice for this family," she said slowly, "then you're not part of this family." At 13, I thought she was just angry. I did not realize she meant it literally. 3 days after that dinner, I came home from the public library to find my belongings packed into 2 black garbage bags sitting on the front porch. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She did not look angry anymore. She looked resolved, like someone who had just finished an unpleasant chore. "I called Rosalind," she said. "She will be here to pick you up. From now on, you are her problem." I stood there on the porch, unable to process what was happening. Behind Mom, I could see Dad in the hallway. He did not look at me. He did not say anything. I looked up at the second-floor window. Nicole was watching from behind the curtain. When our eyes met, she stepped back into the shadows of her room. She did not come down. I waited on that porch from 6 in the evening until 10 at night. 4 hours. My mother went back inside after the first 5 minutes. The porch light never came on. Aunt Rosalind lived in Boston, an hour and a half away. She drove through the night to get to me. When her silver Volvo pulled into the driveway, I was still sitting on those garbage bags, knees pulled to my chest. She got out without saying anything at first, just walked up, looked at me, and wrapped me in a hug so tight I could not breathe. "From now on," she said quietly, "you have a home." That night, as we drove north through the darkness toward Boston, I did not know that my mother had signed a document before Aunt Rosalind left. I did not know what it meant. I was just a scared kid staring out the window, wondering what I had done wrong. It would take 14 years for that document to resurface. And when it did, it would change everything. Aunt Rosalind's house in Boston's Jamaica Plain neighborhood was not large, but it felt enormous compared to the cramped space I had occupied in my family's home. For the first time in my life, I had a room that was entirely mine. More importantly, I had someone who believed in me. Aunt Rosalind had built Castellano Wren Interiors from scratch, a commercial design and architectural staging firm she had started with a single small storefront she had purchased after working double shifts for 7 years. By 2011, her firm handled projects across the greater Boston metro area. She never married, never had children of her own. When I arrived on her doorstep with nothing but 2 garbage bags, she did not just take me in, she invested in me. Over the next 4 years, I poured myself into school. I graduated from Boston Latin Academy in 2015 as class valedictorian, president of the Design Club, with a 4.0 unweighted GPA. Northeastern University offered me admission with a partial scholarship to their business program. By 2019, I had my bachelor's degree in finance, graduating summa cum laude with a 3.91 GPA. Aunt Rosalind had given me apprenticeship opportunities at Castellano Wren Interiors starting my sophomore year. I learned the business from the ground up: client relations, project budgeting, vendor negotiations, site assessments. In 2020, after 18 months at a mid-size accounting firm, I will call Brennan and Cole, I earned my CPA certification. 1 year later, Aunt Rosalind offered me a position as controller. By 2022, I was CFO. On my 25th birthday, I managed a portfolio of 9 active commercial projects with a combined contract value of $14.6 million. Aunt Rosalind sent me an email that day. I still have it saved. The subject line read, "To my daughter." The message was simple. You do not need to prove anything to the people who abandoned you, but you do need to prove to yourself that you are worthy. Happy birthday, Sophia. In 14 years, my biological family reached out exactly 3 times. The first was in 2013. My mother called Aunt Rosalind's phone, not mine, to ask for $4,000. Dad had been laid off from the contracting firm. Times were hard. Surely Rosalind could help her own sister. Aunt Rosalind declined. She told me about the call afterward, her jaw tight. "They have not asked about you once," she said. "Not how you're doing in school. Not if you are okay. They just want money." The second contact came in 2017. Nicole mailed me a wedding invitation. No personal note. "No, I hope you are well." Just the formal printed card with my name and Aunt Rosalind's Boston address. I did not attend. I did not send a gift. I did not respond at all. The third was in 2021. My mother sent me an email, the first direct contact she had initiated since throwing me out. The subject line was checking in. The message mentioned that she had seen an article in the Boston Business Journal about Castellano Wren Interiors expanding into the Seaport district. She hoped I was doing well and suggested we should catch up sometime. I deleted the email without responding. I was not holding a grudge. I had simply built a life that did not include them, and I saw no reason to change that. In the fall of 2024, Aunt Rosalind received a diagnosis that changed everything. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave her 8 to 12 months. She lasted 6. During those final months, Aunt Rosalind met with her estate attorney multiple times. She updated her will in October 2024, 5 months before she passed. When I asked her about it, she just smiled. "Everything is taken care of," she said. "You focus on the business. I have handled the rest." I did not know what she had written. I did not know about the clauses. I trusted her completely. I had no idea what was coming. Aunt Rosalind passed away on April 3rd, 2025. She went peacefully in her sleep at Brigham and Women's Hospital with me holding her hand. 1 week later, on April 10th, I was in my office at Castellano Wren Interiors when my phone buzzed with an unknown Rhode Island number. I almost did not answer. Sophia. The voice was immediately recognizable. 14 years had not changed my mother's particular way of saying my name, like she was tasting something she was not sure she wanted to swallow. Denise. I kept my voice neutral. Not Mom, just her name. A brief pause, I could almost hear her recalibrating. "I heard about Rosalind," she said. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I was thinking I should come up for the memorial service. Pay my respects. The memorial was 4 days ago." Another pause. "Oh, well, I also heard there's a will reading coming up. Family has a right to attend these things, especially when it involves a sister's estate." There it was! The real reason for the call. "How did you find out about the will reading?" "I have an attorney, Gary Whitson. He made some calls." The name sparked a faint memory. Aunt Rosalind had mentioned a Gary Whitson once, an attorney she had consulted years ago and decided not to work with. I spoke to Julian Ferris, Aunt Rosalind's estate attorney. The next morning, he confirmed my suspicions. Denise had hired Gary Whitson to file a claim challenging the will. Their grounds, undue influence, alleging that I had manipulated a sick woman in her final months. They were also demanding to attend the will reading as immediate family members of the deceased. I stared at the photo of Aunt Rosalind on my desk. In the picture, she was smiling, almost like she had known this would happen, almost like she had planned for it. Julian Ferris's office occupied the 32nd floor of a tower in the financial district. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see all the way to the harbor on a clear day. April 14th was not clear. Rain streaked the glass as Julian laid out the situation. Gary Whitson filed a formal challenge to the will on behalf of Anthony and Denise Castellano, he said, sliding a document across his desk. The claim alleges undue influence. They are arguing that you isolated Rosalind from her family during her illness and pressured her to change her estate plan. I read through the filing, my stomach tightening with each paragraph. "They are demanding 40% of the estate," Julian continued. "Their legal theory is that as Rosalind's only surviving sibling, Denise should be entitled to inherit under intestacy principles, or at minimum receive a significant share that reflects the natural bonds of sisterhood." "Natural bonds?" I repeated. "Denise and Rosalind had not spoken in 6 years before I came to live with her. Did you know that?" Julian nodded. "I am aware. Rosalind told me the whole history, but that is not what concerns me about this filing." He pulled out another page from his folder. "They do not need to win this case. If this goes to litigation, the estate could be frozen for 12 to 18 months during discovery and trial. Meanwhile, the projects need management. Clients need attention. Payroll needs to be met. A protracted legal battle could cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees and potentially devalue the entire firm. So they are betting I will pay them off to make them go away. That is the strategy," Julian agreed. "It is not unusual in estate disputes." I looked down at the challenge filing. In the section describing our family history, Denise had written that I had abandoned my family and exploited Rosalind's loneliness. The woman who threw me out was claiming I abandoned her. Do you have any documentation about your circumstances in 2011? Julian asked. Anything that establishes what actually happened when you went to live with Rosalind? I thought back to that night on the porch. The garbage bags, the 4-hour wait, Aunt Rosalind arriving in the darkness. I was 13, I said. I did not exactly keep records. Rosalind did. Julian was already reaching for his phone. He dialed his assistant and asked for a specific file number from the archives. 20 minutes later, his assistant returned with a yellowed folder. Julian opened it carefully, scanning the contents. Then he looked up at me with an expression I could not quite read. Sophia, did you know about this? He slid the document across the desk. The header read, Voluntary Relinquishment of Parental Rights and Transfer of Guardianship, dated August 9, 2011. The document stated that Anthony James Castellano and Denise Marie Castellano, being of sound mind, voluntarily relinquished all parental rights and responsibilities for their minor daughter, Sophia Elena Castellano, and transferred full legal guardianship to Rosalind Ann Castellano. At the bottom were 4 signatures. My mother's, my father's, Aunt Rosalind's, and a notary public from Suffolk County, Massachusetts. File number 2011 GH4192. They did not just kick you out, Julian said quietly. They legally gave you up. They signed away their parental rights. As far as the law is concerned, Denise and Anthony Castellano stopped being your parents the moment they signed this document. My hands were trembling. I had been 13 years old, sitting on a porch in the dark. I had no idea my mother had been signing papers inside the house. What does this mean for their claim? Julian's expression shifted. It means Denise has no standing to claim inheritance through familial relationship. Legally, she is not your parent. She severed that connection herself in writing with witnesses 14 years ago. Julian offered me 2 paths forward. Option 1, we negotiate, he said. I reach out to Whitson, explain that their legal position is weaker than they realize, and offer a settlement, $400,000 to $700,000, in exchange for them withdrawing their challenge and signing a waiver of any future claims. It is faster, cleaner, and avoids any public spectacle. And option 2? We proceed with the will reading as scheduled. They have demanded to attend as family members. We let them. Then we present the evidence, the guardianship transfer document, the full history, everything Rosalind wanted disclosed in the event of a challenge. He paused. Rosalind anticipated this, Sophia. She left specific instructions for how to handle exactly this scenario. She wanted the truth on the record. I went home that night and could not sleep. I sat in the living room of the house Aunt Rosalind had left me, staring at the family photos on the mantel. There were pictures of me at every stage. High school graduation, college commencement, the day I got my CPA license, my first day as CFO. In every photo, Aunt Rosalind was beaming beside me. There were no photos of Anthony or Denise. Not one. I thought about Aunt Rosalind's words from that email years ago. You do not owe them anything, but you owe yourself the truth. At 7, the next morning, I called Julian. I want the will reading to proceed. I said, no settlement, no buyout. If they want to be present for this, let them, but we are not hiding anything. Are you sure? Once this becomes public, they chose to make this public when they filed their challenge. I'm just respecting their choice. The will reading was scheduled for Friday, April 18th, 2025, at 2 p.m. in the Ferris and Delgado conference room. 5 days away. The next few days were a blur of preparation. My best friend Camila Ruiz, we had met when she joined Castellano Wren Interiors as operations director 3 years earlier, helped me organize the documentation. She was the only person besides Julian who knew the full story of my childhood. 39 emails, Camila said, looking up from her laptop in my office on Wednesday evening. 39 emails from Rosalind to you over 10 years, documenting her relationship with you and her reasons for estranging herself from Denise. The emails painted a clear picture. In 2003, Denise had borrowed $52,000 from Rosalind, with a promise to repay it within 5 years. 22 years later, not a single dollar had been returned. That broken promise had fractured their relationship. My arrival in 2011 had nothing to do with their estrangement. It had already been festering for 8 years. Camilla also pulled the financial reports from my 3 years as CFO. Under my leadership, the Castellano Wren Interiors project pipeline had grown from $9.8 million to $14.86 million, a 49% increase in value. Client retention rates averaged 94%. Employee satisfaction scores were the highest in the company's history. On Thursday evening, I met with Dr. Naomi Bellwether, the therapist I had been seeing since my early 20s. "Remember why you're doing this," she said. "You're not seeking revenge. You're closing a chapter. There is a difference. What if I feel satisfaction when they realize they have lost?" Dr. Bellwether smiled gently. "That is called justice, Sophia. Feeling validated when the truth comes out is not the same as cruelty. The question is what you do afterward." I drove home that night through Boston's rain-slicked streets, thinking about her words. I looked in the bathroom mirror before bed. "She has no power over you anymore." I told my reflection, "Only you get to decide your story now." Friday was coming, and I was ready. Okay, let me pause here for a second. If you have made it this far and you're wondering how I handled what came next, drop a comment with your prediction. What do you think Denise did at the will reading? And if this story resonates with you, if you have ever had to set boundaries with family, do not forget to subscribe. We are just getting to the part you have been waiting for. Now, back to that Friday afternoon. The Ferris and Delgado conference room occupied a corner of the 32nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Boston Harbor and the financial district beyond. On a clear day, it would have been breathtaking. On April 18, 2025, the sky was overcast, the water a steel gray that matched my mood. I arrived 15 minutes early at 1:45 p.m. I wore a charcoal-tailored suit, professional, understated. My hair was pulled back in a simple twist. I had learned from Aunt Rosalind that the most powerful people in the room never needed to announce themselves. The conference room could seat 18 at the main table, with additional chairs arranged along the walls. When I entered, 12 people were already present. Julian Ferris sat at the head of the table with a junior associate. Margaret Okonkwo, the senior auditor from Brennan and Cole, who had handled Aunt Rosalind's accounts for a decade, occupied a seat near the window. Representatives from 2 charitable organizations filled several chairs, Boston Children's Hospital and the trustees of reservations. Aunt Rosalind had been a significant donor to both for over 15 years. 4 senior staff members from Castellano Wren Interiors sat together near the door. They had worked with Aunt Rosalind for years and had known me since my apprentice days. Julian caught my eye and nodded toward a seat at the center of the table, directly across from where he would be reading the will. I took my place, arranging the folder of documents Camilla had prepared in front of me. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see the elevator lobby. At 2:03 p.m., the elevator doors opened. My mother stepped out first. Even from across the floor, I could see she had dressed for the occasion. Charcoal dress, gold necklace, full makeup. Behind her came my father, my sister, and a man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. The show was about to begin. Denise Castellano entered the conference room like she owned it. That was always her way, projecting confidence she had not earned, claiming space she had not been given. She wore a dress that looked new, and her necklace caught the overhead lights as she surveyed the room with a practiced expression of dignified grief. Behind her, my father, Anthony, shuffled in, wearing a navy suit that did not quite fit anymore. He had gained weight in the years since I had seen him. His eyes found me briefly, then darted away. He had always been good at looking away. Nicole followed in a pale yellow dress, an odd choice for a will reading, like she had gotten confused about what event she was attending. At 29, she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the early morning drive from Providence. Their attorney, Gary Whitson, brought up the rear. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of polished confidence that came from decades of high-stakes litigation. His briefcase probably cost more than my first month's salary at Brennan and Cole. Denise's gaze swept the room until it landed on me. "Ah," she said, her voice carrying in that way she had perfected. "You are here already. I did not stand. Denise? The single word, her name, not mom, made her pause mid-stride. Something flickered across her face, then she recovered. I was hoping we could speak privately before this starts. Family matters should be handled by family. The proceedings begin in 2 minutes, I said. I'm sure whatever you have to say can wait. Julian Ferris rose from his seat. Mrs. Castellano, Miss Castellano, Ms. Castellano, Mr. Whitson. There are seats arranged for attending parties along the wall. The main table is reserved for beneficiaries and estate representatives. Denise's jaw tightened visibly. She had expected a seat at the center of things. Instead, she was being directed to the margins. She was not even at the table. Denise did not take her seat quietly. Instead, she detoured past the representatives from Boston Children's Hospital, pausing to introduce herself with an expression of practiced sorrow. I am Denise Castellano, she said, loud enough for most of the room to hear, Rosalind's sister-in-law. We were quite close for many years before this unfortunate estrangement. She glanced meaningfully in my direction. The hospital representative, a woman in her 50s named Dr. Alicia Monroe, nodded politely but said nothing. Denise continued undeterred. It is so tragic how some people come into a family and create division. Rosalind was such a generous woman, so trusting, perhaps too trusting. I kept my eyes on my folder. I did not respond. I had learned long ago that Denise fed on reactions. Nicole, settling into a chair against the wall, added her piece. Aunt Rosalind used to visit us in Providence all the time when we were kids. I do not understand why she gets to sit up there, and we are back here. Gary Whitson was already taking notes, his pen moving across a legal pad, documenting everything, building their case, looked for any reaction he could twist. I gave him nothing. Denise took her seat beside Nicole, but she was not finished. As Julian organized his papers at the head of the table, Denise's voice cut through the quiet room once more. A child who has been rejected by her parents usually has a reason. I just wish Rosalind had seen through her the way we did. A mother always knows. The words hung in the air. Several people in the room shifted uncomfortably. Margaret Okonkwo, the auditor, was staring at Denise with open disbelief. I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time in 14 years. She had not changed at all. The same certainty, the same need to control the narrative, the same absolute conviction that she was the victim. Julian cleared his throat. It is 2:10. We will begin. Julian Ferris broke the seal on a large envelope with the careful precision of someone who had performed this ritual hundreds of times. This is the last will and testament of Rosalind Ann Castellano, he began, his voice carrying the formal weight the moment demanded. Born September 2nd, 1958, deceased April 3rd, 2025. This document was executed on October 22nd, 2024, and represents the final expression of Miss Castellano's wishes regarding the disposition of her estate. Denise sat forward slightly, her necklace catching the light. Julian continued reading the preliminary sections. Article 1 confirmed Rosalind's identity and residence. Article 2 declared her to be of sound mind. Julian noted that a psychiatric evaluation had been conducted by Dr. Owen Marsh on October 14, 2024, 8 days before the will was signed. The evaluation confirmed Ms. Castellano possessed full testamentary capacity and was under no undue influence at the time of execution. As Julian read, I caught Denise exchanging a glance with Gary Whitson. They had been banking on challenging Rosalind's mental state. This documentation complicated their strategy. Article 3 revoked all prior wills and codicils. Then Julian turned to Article 4, the inventory of assets. At the time of death, Ms. Castellano's estate included the following: full ownership of Castellano Wren Interiors, with a business valuation of $11 and $30 million in investment accounts containing diversified holdings valued at approximately $2.8 real property, including the Jamaica Plain residence and a small commercial building in the Seaport District, combined value $2.4 million. Cash and liquid assets totaling $900,000. I heard Nicole whisper to Denise, "That is over $17 million." Denise nodded, her eyes calculating. Julian looked up briefly. The will contains 41 pages. I will now proceed to Article 5, which addresses specific bequests and exclusions. He turned the page and adjusted his reading glasses. Article 5, regarding Denise Marie Castellano, sister of the deceased. Denise actually smiled. She would not be smiling for long. Julian's voice was steady as he read the opening line. I make no provision in this will for my sister, Denise Marie Castellano, for the following reasons, which I wish to be read aloud and entered into the record. Denise's smile flickered. Julian continued reading Rosalind's words. First, in the spring of 2003, Denise borrowed $52,000 from me with a written promise to repay the full amount within 5 years. 22 years have passed. Not $1 has been returned. I have retained the original promissory note as documentation. Denise's face went pale. She had not expected this. Second, on August 9, 2011, Denise and her husband Anthony voluntarily executed a legal document relinquishing all parental rights to their daughter, Sophia Elena Castellano, transferring full guardianship to me. This document was properly witnessed and notarized. Denise shot to her feet. What does that have to do with anything? Julian paused, looked at Denise over his glasses, and continued reading without acknowledging the outburst. The significance of this document is as follows. By legally terminating their parental relationship with Sophia, Denise and Anthony severed any claim they might have had to inherit from me through her. Sophia is my legal heir. Denise is not her legal mother. Therefore, Denise has no familial relationship with my designated heir and no standing to challenge this will on grounds of family connection. Anthony stood now too. This is ridiculous. I'm Rosalind's brother-in-law. Gary Whitson grabbed Anthony's arm, pulling him back down, but even the attorney's face had gone gray. Julian reached into his file and produced a document. For the record, the original voluntary relinquishment of parental rights is on file with Suffolk County Family Court, file number 2011GH4192. I have a certified copy here, which any party may examine. He laid the document on the table. Denise stared at it like it was a live grenade. Denise did not sit back down. Her composure, that careful mask she had worn into the room, cracked visibly. Her voice rose sharp and desperate. This is insane. That paper does not mean anything. We are still her family. Julian's voice remained level. Mrs. Castellano, I must ask you to take your seat. Disrupting the reading of a will is a matter the court takes seriously. Denise ignored him. She pointed directly at me. She did this. She manipulated Rosalind against her own family. She poisoned her against us. Dr. Alicia Munro from Boston Children's Hospital looked uncomfortable. The charity representatives had not signed up for a family meltdown. Nicole tugged at Denise's sleeve. Mom, sit down. People are watching. I do not care who is watching. Denise's voice cracked. I want to know how this happened. Rosalind loved Anthony. They were family. Finally, I spoke. My voice came out calm, steady. The way Aunt Rosalind had taught me to speak in difficult negotiations. Never raise your voice. Make them strain to hear you. Denise, you made a choice 14 years ago. You put my belongings in garbage bags and left me on a porch in the dark. Then you went inside and signed a document giving me away. I was 13 years old. The room was absolutely silent. That was your decision, I continued. Not mine, not Aunt Rosalind's, yours. Everything that is happening today is simply the consequence of what you chose to do that night. Denise's mouth opened, but no words came out. I looked at her steadily. I do not hate you, but I also do not owe you anything. You made sure of that when you signed that paper. Gary Whitson was writing furiously on his legal pad, though I could not imagine what strategy he thought he could salvage. Julian cleared his throat. If we may continue, I have not yet read Clause 8. Denise finally sank back into her chair. But Clause 8 was the one that would truly end her hopes. Julian turned to page 14 of the will and paused. Then he read the words that would change everything. Article 8, Designation of Sole Beneficiary. The room held its breath. I hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, including all real property, business interests, investment accounts, liquid assets, and personal effects to my legally adopted daughter, Sophia Elena Castellano, adopted. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Denise's face went white. Actually white, like someone had drained the blood from her head. Adopted? Since when? Anthony's voice was hoarse. This cannot. Julian answered with the same calm precision he had used throughout. Ms. Rosalind Castellano formally adopted Sophia Elena Castellano on November 3, 2013, when she was 15 years old. The adoption was finalized in Suffolk County Family Court, file number 2013 AD 2087, as Mr. and Mrs. Anthony Castellano had already legally relinquished their parental rights in 2011. No additional consent was required. Nicole stared at me. So you're not even related to us anymore? I met her eyes. Not legally, not since Mom and Dad signed me away. Julian continued reading. Sophia is not merely a beneficiary. She is my daughter in every way that matters. Legally, practically, and emotionally. She has worked alongside me for years, proven her competence and integrity, and I trust her completely to continue the work I began. There is no one more deserving of this inheritance, and no one I love more. My vision blurred. I blinked back tears. Aunt Rosalind had never told me about the full language of this clause. She had kept it a secret, waiting for this moment, knowing it might come. Denise was shaking her head slowly, like someone trying to wake from a nightmare. This cannot be legal, she whispered. Gary, tell them this cannot be legal. Gary Whitson did not answer. He was staring at his legal pad, pen motionless. He knew the case was over. Julian reached into his folder and withdrew a sealed envelope, smaller than the others. There is one more item, he said. Ms. Castellano left a personal letter for Sophia, with instructions that I offer to read a portion aloud during this proceeding, if Sophia consents. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Julian opened the envelope carefully and unfolded a single handwritten page. Aunt Rosalind's familiar script filled the paper. The same handwriting I had seen on birthday cards and emails and notes left on my desk over 14 years. Julian began to read. Sophia, if this letter is being read aloud, it means things happened exactly as I expected. Your biological family showed up looking for money they never earned from a woman they never cared about. I'm sorry you have to go through this, but I also know you're strong enough to handle it. A soft sound escaped Denise's throat, almost a whimper. You came to me as a wounded child, thrown away by people who should have protected you. But you did not let that define you. You transformed your pain into determination, your loneliness into independence, your rejection into resilience. I have never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. Julian's voice softened slightly as he continued. I did not save you, Sophia. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to do it. Everything you have achieved, your education, your career, your character, you earned through your own effort. I'm leaving you my estate, not because you need it, but because you deserve it, and because I know you will use it to help others the way I tried to help you. Tears were streaming down my face now. I did not try to stop them. Do not let them make you feel guilty for surviving them. Do not let them back in unless you choose to. You owe them nothing. You owe yourself everything. I love you, Sophia. Forever your mother, Rosalind. Denise made one last desperate play. She stood again, but this time her voice had shifted. The anger was gone, replaced by something that was meant to sound like wounded motherhood. Sophia, sweetheart, I know things were hard when you were young. I made mistakes. I admit that now, but we are still blood. We can work through this. Cannot we at least talk about dividing the estate fairly? I wiped my eyes and looked at her. You gave up the right to call me sweetheart 14 years ago? I want to contest this will, Denise announced to the room. Gary, tell them we have grounds, undue influence. Rosalind was sick, she isolated her. Gary Whitson finally spoke, though he sounded like a man reading his own obituary. Mrs. Castellano, perhaps we should discuss our options privately. No, tell them we are going to fight this. Julian interrupted by turning his tablet around to face the room. On the screen was an email thread. Mr. Whitson, perhaps you would like to explain this to your clients. The room went quiet. Julian read aloud. This is an email dated February 18th, 2022, From Rosalind Castellano to Gary Whitson. The subject line is terminating services. In the email, Ms. Castellano writes, Gary, I am ending our professional relationship. Your advice that I include Denise in my estate plan, despite her years of financial exploitation and her treatment of Sophia, is unacceptable. I will be engaging new counsel. He looked up at Gary. You previously represented Rosalind Castellano. You were terminated because you advocated for Denise's interests over Rosalind's wishes. And now you have accepted this case against Rosalind's estate without disclosing that conflict of interest to your current clients. Gary's face had gone the color of old concrete. Denise turned to stare at him. You told me we would win. He had no answer. Gary Whitson stood up abruptly, gathering his briefcase with shaking hands. I need to review these documents, he said, his voice stripped of its earlier polish. We should discuss our options privately, Mrs. Castellano. Discuss what? Denise's voice was rising again. You are leaving right now in the middle of this. Gary did not answer. He was already moving toward the door, walking with the stiff gait of a man who knew his career might be imploding. Gary, Denise called after him. Gary. The conference room door closed behind him with a soft click. Denise stood frozen, abandoned by her own attorney in front of everyone she had hoped to impress. Anthony had not said a word in minutes. He sat slumped in his chair, staring at the floor. He had spent his whole life following Denise's lead, and now she had led them both off a cliff. Nicole was crying quietly. I could not tell if she was upset about the money or about the public humiliation. Denise turned back to me one more time. The mask was completely gone now. Underneath it was just desperation. And beneath that, something that might have been the first stirrings of real regret. Sophia, her voice broke. We are still a family, are not we? Blood is blood. You could still. I stood up from the table. Denise, you stopped being my family on August 9th, 2011. You signed the document yourself. I did not make that choice. You did. I gathered my folder and looked at her steadily. I do not hate you. I actually feel sorry for you, but you have no claim on me. Not legally, not emotionally, not in any way that matters. I turned to Julian. Can we continue with the remaining articles? Julian nodded. Denise sat down heavily. She did not speak again for the rest of the reading. Julian turned to the next section with practice calm. Article 9, Charitable Bequests. The representatives from the two charitable organizations straightened in their seats. I direct that the following gifts be made from my estate. $400,000 to Boston Children's Hospital, to be used for the establishment of a scholarship fund for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. $250,000 to the trustees of reservations, for the preservation of public land in Massachusetts. Dr. Alicia Monroe from Boston Children's Hospital nodded solemnly. Rosalind was one of our most consistent donors for over 15 years. This gift will help hundreds of families. Julian continued. I also request that my daughter Sophia continue the charitable giving programs I established during my lifetime, at her discretion. I trust her judgment completely. I found my voice. I will honor everything Aunt Rosalind built. A thought occurred to me as I looked at the charity representatives sitting in this room. They were not here because the law required it. They were here because Aunt Rosalind had asked them to come. She had wanted witnesses, neutral parties who could testify to exactly what had happened here today. If Denise and Anthony tried to pursue their case further, Aunt Rosalind had anticipated every move. Dr. Monroe caught my eye and offered a small, kind smile. Rosalind used to talk about you constantly. Every board meeting, every donor event, Sophia did this. Sophia achieved that. She was so proud of you. I blinked back fresh tears. Even in death, Aunt Rosalind had surrounded me with people who believed in me. When Julian finished reading the final articles of the will, he turned to me. Sophia, as sole beneficiary and executor, would you like to say a few words? I had not planned to speak, but 33 pairs of eyes were watching me, and I realized there were things that needed to be said, not for Denise's benefit, but for my own. I rose from my seat. Most of you knew Aunt Rosalind far longer than I did. She took me in when I was 13 years old and had nothing. She gave me a home, an education, And most importantly, a family that chose to love me. I looked around the room at the Castellano Wren Interiors employees who had watched me grow from an apprentice into a CFO, at the charity representatives who had witnessed Aunt Rosalind's generosity for decades. With this inheritance, I intend to continue everything Rosalind built. The firm will be run with the same integrity she established. The charitable commitments will be maintained, and I will be establishing a new scholarship fund, the Rosalind Castellano Young Scholars Fund, for children from difficult family situations who need someone to believe in them. My eyes found Denise, still sitting rigid in her chair. As for my biological relatives, I hold no grudge. I have made peace with what happened. But peace does not mean pretending it did not happen, and it does not mean opening doors I have worked hard to close. I took a breath. Aunt Rosalind taught me that family is about choice. The people who show up for you when everything falls apart, those are your family. By that definition, the people in this room who knew Rosalind, who worked with her, who respected her, you are more my family than the people who share my DNA. I sat back down. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Margaret Okonkwo, the auditor, began to clap. Others followed. Denise did not move. Julian formally concluded the reading at 3:52 p.m. The will has been read in its entirety. All legal requirements have been satisfied. Ms. Castellano, you may contact our office next week to begin the transfer process. The estate should be fully settled within 14 business days. People began to rise, conversations murmuring to life around the room. Denise stood slowly, like a woman who had aged 10 years in 2 hours. Anthony was already shuffling toward the door, not looking at anyone. Nicole gathered her purse and followed her father without a word. Denise lingered. She turned back to look at me one final time. Her makeup had smeared slightly around her eyes. The confident woman who had entered this room expecting millions now looked diminished. Smaller somehow, she opened her mouth as if to say something. I saw her lips form what might have been the beginning of "I'm sorry." But then she closed her mouth, turned away, and walked out. I watched her go. This woman who had thrown me away like damaged goods, who had signed papers to make it legal, who had shown up 14 years later expecting to profit from her cruelty. I felt a brief flicker of something. Not satisfaction exactly. Not vindication. Something more complicated. The strange emptiness that comes when a chapter finally closes. Dr. Munro from Boston Children's Hospital approached me as the room cleared. "Rosalind talked about you every time we met," she said, shaking my hand. "She told me once that taking you in was the best decision she ever made. I can see why." She pressed a business card into my palm. "When you are ready to discuss that scholarship fund, please call me directly." Camilla appeared at my side, squeezing my arm. "You did it?" she said quietly. "Rosalind would be so proud." I looked at the photo of Aunt Rosalind I had brought with me. I hoped she was right. I need to take a breath here for a second. That was the moment I had been dreading and hoping for at the same time. If you have ever had to stand up to someone who hurt you, someone who still believed they were the victim, you know how exhausting it is. Have you been through something similar? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to know what happened after that conference room emptied, stay with me. The story is not over. 1 week after the will reading, Julian Ferris filed a formal complaint with the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers. The subject, Gary Whitson's ethical violations. I did not ask him to do it. He did it because it was his professional obligation. When an attorney witnesses another attorney violating the rules of professional conduct, reporting is required. The complaint outlined 3 violations. First, conflict of interest. Whitson had previously represented Rosalind Castellano and gained confidential information about her estate planning. Second, failure to disclose. Whitson never told Denise or Anthony about his prior relationship with Rosalind. Third, misrepresentation. Whitson had led his clients to believe they had a strong case, when he knew or should have known that their legal position was fundamentally compromised. Julian kept me updated throughout the process. 2 months after the filing, in late June 2025, the board issued its ruling. Gary Whitson was suspended from practicing law for 5 months. He was also fined $12,000 and required to complete additional ethics training. Within weeks of the suspension, 2 of Whitson's largest clients quietly transferred their business elsewhere. I heard through legal community gossip that his firm's revenue dropped by roughly $150,000 that year. Camilla asked me once if I felt satisfied by Whitson's downfall. I did not do anything to him, I told her. He did this to himself. I just happened to be there when the consequences caught up. That was the truth. I had not sought revenge against Gary Whitson. I had not filed the complaint. I had not lobbied for his suspension. He had made his own choices, taking a case he knew was ethically compromised, lying to clients who trusted him, betting he could win through intimidation rather than merit. His career suffered because of what he chose to do. Some people build their own prisons without any help. 3 weeks after the will reading, an email appeared in my inbox from Denise Castellano72, gmail.com. Subject, please read. The message was longer than I expected. Denise had never been one for written communication. She preferred phone calls, where she could control the tone, interrupt, redirect. Sophia, I know you probably will not read this, but I need to say some things. I have been thinking about what happened at the will reading. I was angry and I said things I should not have. But I want you to know that I understand now, that I made mistakes when you were young. I was overwhelmed. Your father and I were struggling financially. Things got away from us. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. We are still family, Sophia. Blood does not just disappear because of legal papers. I am your mother. Nothing can change that. Can we talk? I think if we just sat down together, we could work through this. I love you. I always have. Mom? I read the email 3 times. Then I called Dr. Bellwether, my therapist, and read it to her over the phone. What do you notice about the email? She asked. I thought about it. She acknowledges mistakes but does not name what they were. She blames circumstances, financial struggles, being overwhelmed. She says she is not asking for money, but then pivots to working through this. And she still calls herself mom, even though she signed away that right. What do you want to do? I took 2 days to write my response. It was 4 sentences long. Denise, I have read your email. I forgave you a long time ago. For myself? Not for you, but I do not want a relationship with you. Please do not contact me again. She did not reply. I felt no guilt, only clarity. 2 months after the will reading, a letter arrived at my Boston address. Not an email, an actual letter, handwritten on plain paper, stuffed into a slightly wrinkled envelope with a Providence postmark. The return address listed N. Wallace. Nicole had taken her husband's name when she got married. I opened it reluctantly, expecting more manipulation. What I found was different. Sophia, I'm not writing this to ask for anything. I do not want money. I do not want forgiveness. I just need to say something I should have said 14 years ago. The night Mom and Dad kicked you out, I was watching from my bedroom window. I saw you sitting on the porch with those garbage bags. I watched for 4 hours. I saw you alone in the dark waiting, and I never came down. I was 15. I could have brought you water or sat with you or at least told you I was sorry. Instead, I just watched from the window like a coward. That has haunted me ever since. Every time Mom would talk about you, always blaming you, always making herself the victim, I would think about that window, about what I did not do. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for a relationship. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. I failed you when you needed family most. You deserved better from your older sister. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand. But I could not let another year pass without telling you the truth. Nicole? I read the letter 4 times. It was the first honest thing anyone in my biological family had ever said to me. I did not write back immediately. I needed time to figure out what, if anything, I wanted to do with this unexpected opening. But for the first time in 14 years, I felt something other than distance when I thought about my sister. 4 months after the will reading, I finally wrote back to Nicole. Dr. Bellwether had helped me think through what I actually wanted. Not what I felt obligated to do, not what would look generous or forgiving, what I genuinely wanted for myself. The answer surprised me. I did not want to shut Nicole out completely. Her letter had been the first honest acknowledgement of what happened that night. No excuses, no deflection, no requests for money, just accountability. But I also was not ready to trust her. 14 years of distance does not disappear because of one letter. So I wrote back with conditions. Nicole, I have read your letter many times. I appreciate that you acknowledged what happened without making excuses. That took courage. I'm not ready for a full relationship, but I am open to cautious contact under these conditions. First, no contact through mom or dad. I have ended communication with them permanently, and I need that boundary respected. Second, no discussions about money, inheritance, or anything related to Aunt Rosalind's estate. Ever. Third, I reserve the right to end any conversation without explanation. If I go quiet, I need you to respect that. If these conditions work for you, we can start with a monthly video call, 15 minutes, low pressure. We can talk about our lives, surface level at first. If that goes well, we can gradually build from there. This is not me saying everything is forgiven and forgotten. This is me saying I'm willing to see if there's something worth building, but it has to be on my terms. Let me know if you accept these conditions. Sophia, her reply came 3 days later. One word, accepted. I scheduled our first call for the following Saturday. 15 minutes, that was all I could commit to, but it was a start. The first video call with Nicole happened on a Saturday afternoon in September 2025, 6 months after the will reading. I sat in my home office with my laptop open, watching the seconds count down until 2 p.m. My heart was beating faster than it had during the will reading. This felt more dangerous somehow. Confronting Denise had been about defending myself against an attack. This was about choosing to be vulnerable. The call connected. Nicole's face filled the screen. She looked different than she had at the will reading. Less made up, more tired, but also somehow more real. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We stared at each other for a moment, 14 years compressed into a video call rectangle. "I was not sure you would actually answer," she admitted. I almost did not. That broke something loose. Nicole laughed, a nervous, relieved sound, and I found myself almost smiling. We kept it light as I had requested. Surface level, she told me about her job. She was training to become a dental hygienist, working toward her license. She mentioned her kids, Mason, 7, and Ava, 5, without asking me to be their aunt. I told her about the business, about Boston weather, about nothing too personal. At 14 minutes, I said we should wrap up. Sophia. Nicole's voice stopped me before I could end the call. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I know you did not have to." "This is step 1, I said. "We will see where it goes." Step 1 is more than I expected. We scheduled another call for the following month. After she hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, processing. I did not know if Nicole and I would ever have a real relationship. Maybe we would stay in this tentative place forever. But for the first time, I was the one deciding what happened next. That power was worth more than the inheritance. April 18th, 2026. 1 year exactly since the will reading that changed everything. I stood outside a modest commercial building in the Seaport District, the first property Aunt Rosalind ever purchased, back in 1991 when she was 33 years old, with a dream and barely enough money for a down payment. The building had been renovated last fall, new windows, updated systems, fresh landscaping, but today I was here for something else. A bronze plaque had been mounted beside the main entrance. The Rosalind A. Castellano building, in memory of a woman who chose love over blood, 1958 to 2025. I touched the letters of her name, feeling the cold metal under my fingertips. In the years since the will reading, Castellano Wren Interiors had grown by 15%, bringing the firm's valuation to $16.23 million. Client retention remained above 92%. We had expanded into a new office and taken on 2 major new commercial contracts. More importantly, the Rosalind Castellano Young Scholars Fund had awarded its first grants. 4 students from difficult family situations, each receiving full funding for summer programs in science, design, and mathematics. Dr. Monroe at Boston Children's Hospital had helped select the recipients. Nicole and I still talked once a month. The conversations had gotten slightly easier. We had graduated from 15 minutes to 25. I had seen pictures of her kids. She had seen pictures of my apartment. We were not sisters in any traditional sense, but we were something. Denise and Anthony had stopped trying to contact me. I did not know what their lives looked like now, and I found that I did not need to know. Camila walked up beside me, looking at the plaque. "You okay?" I considered the question. "I am peaceful," I said. "That is even better than happy." Aunt Rosalind had taught me that family is a choice, and I had finally learned to choose myself. The sky over Boston was clear for the first time in weeks. I could see all the way to the harbor. If I look at my own story through a psychological lens, there is a concept called conditional self-worth. The belief that you are only valuable if certain people approve of you. I spent the first 13 years of my life trapped in that belief. My mother's indifference felt like proof that I did not matter. What actually saved me was not Aunt Rosalind's money. It was her unconditional acceptance. She saw me for who I was, not who I should have been. Here's what I want you to take from this story. You do not need anyone's permission to know your worth, and you have every right to set boundaries, even with family, even with parents, even with blood. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. Reconciliation is something you choose for yourself. These are two different things, and no one gets to decide which one you offer. Your story is yours to write. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. If it resonated with you, if you have ever had to find your own worth after someone tried to take it away, I hope you know you're not alone. If you would like to hear more stories like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And check the description for links to similar stories about boundaries, family, and finding your own way. Until next time, take care.